do a background check on everybody before they buy a gun. I mean, you mentioned the Crossroads of the West gun show. There were people selling guns in that gun show to strangers they've never met before, not even with a background check. You know, when you allow people to sell guns like that to just anyone who has enough cash in the middle of public, you know, everyone is at risk from getting shot when you allow guns to be traded in such a way. So we need to legitimize the gun market, not ban all guns, but make it more difficult for dangerous people to just walk into somewhere and walk out with a gun.
I want to go back to the film about you, Living for 32, in which you, Colin, go to a gun show and try to purchase a gun. This is the clip.
How you doing, sir? I wonder if we can see your Mahdi Egyptian. I'm looking at that thing. $660 for it?
Yeah, out the door. Have to be over 18, Ohio resident. No tax and no payment. Oh, I need to see your driver's license. Yeah, are you an Ohio resident?
You've been to one gun show, you've been to all gun shows. It's pretty much the same. You pay your, I think it was $8 entry fee. You know, you walk in, you walk past the guy, he asks you if you have any concealed weapons on you. And you start walking around looking at stuff. And then you keep going, and then, you know, every once in a while you'll see a guy that's got, you know, just a couple of guns on the table, doesn't really look that official, doesn't have a computer, doesn't have a phone. You know, you go up to him, you start talking to him, and you ask him, you know, what do you got to do to buy this gun that he's got? And he says, you know, sometimes all you need is a license, and sometimes you don't even need that. If you tell him you don't have it, like I told him, you know, he's like, all right.
Checks are required for purchases through licensed gun dealers. No check is required for private sales, such as those through online or print ads or gun shows. It's a major problem. From November 2011 to November 2012, an estimated 6.6 million gun transactions occurred without a background check. Last October in Brookfield, Wisconsin, 7 women were shot by a prohibited purchaser who was under a domestic violence restraining order. The shooter answered an online ad, was able to buy a gun without a check very quickly. He had the sale been required to have a check, this tragedy could have been prevented. Background checks work. They stopped nearly 2 million prohibited purchasers between 1994 and 2009. We already have a national background check system in place. Therefore, extending a background check to all firearms purchases can easily be implemented. And it should be, without delay. States can't do it alone. Interstate firearms trafficking is a rampant problem, and it must be addressed federally. According to ATF, in 2009, 30% of guns recovered at crime scenes crossed state lines. Maryland recovered nearly 2,000 last year from outside the state. Submissions to NICS must be approved, especially mental health and drug abuse records. In 2007 massacre at Virginia Tech is a great example of a prohibited purchaser slipping through the cracks due to an incomplete NICS background check.
I came to this issue as a mayor. Not only had I had the experience when I was a teenager of seeing a friend get a bullet in the back because of the all too common incident of we found a gun, we didn't know it was loaded, which happens every day in this country. But as a mayor, I saw what happens in a community when there are so many guns and when we make it so easy for dangerous people to get guns. I had police officers. One case I still remember well. I got the call in the middle of the night from the police chief. Our labor relations director, a police chief, married to a police officer. They kept the gun at their headboard. They wanted to be safe. They knew how to use the gun. They were police officers. They had a fight, domestic quarrel. She ended up dead. That happens a lot in this country. Actually, the statistics show that if you've got a gun in your home, it's 22 times more likely to be used against you or a family member than to protect you. Think about that again, 22 times more likely. And part of the reason is that the world doesn't easily divide into the good guys and bad guys, because there's always sort of a chance that any of us can get angry. Any of us can get drunk. And if the gun is there, what's going to happen?
Now, by the way, on the facts, I know I rub a lot of you, gun rights people the wrong way when I give you facts, but it's a sad day for you. This is the reality, okay? Now, this is from a Harvard study. Those with firearms are about 4.5 times more likely to be shot. So if you got a gun, the gun will protect me. No, it won't. It'll make you 4.5 times more likely to get shot.
The country is embroiled in a debate over gun control. We want to turn now to a controversial gun law referred to as Stand Your Ground. A new study finds that homicides increase after states adopt the law. It's by Texas A&M University, and it was conducted from 2000 to 2010, a span of 10 years. During this time, more than 20 states passed Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground laws. The study found a 7 to 9% spike in homicides in states that implemented the law. Part of the study states, quote, results indicate the laws do not deter burglary, robbery, or aggravated assault. In contrast, they lead to a statistically significant 8% net increase in the number of reported murders and non-negligent manslaughters.
Use it. Now, how about if you're attacked? This is the NRA situation. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Turns out wrong again, Bob. Individuals who had time to resist and counter in a gun assault, odds of actually being shot increased 5.45 times. So it's actually even more than if you just own a gun.
Buyback question issue.
I think the issue for us is clearly that there has to be far more than being mobile and not being blind as a reason to give someone a firearms permit. And just within the last several months at one of the largest festivals in the city, the Folklife Festivals, tens of thousands of people and literally dozens of police officers within spitting distance, in fact, of the crowd, a young man who had been on methadone, who had had a number of other problems, had a license issued by the sheriff in a neighboring county so that he could carry a concealed firearm anywhere. And in the middle of this crowd, he looked at someone, that person looked at him, and they got into a fight. The gun went off, and it not only discharged across the assailant, the person that he was fighting with, and all they'd been fighting with were their hands. The gun also then ended up going through the hand of a young man and into the thigh of another woman. That is a person that should have never had a concealed firearm.
Didn't show up for school this morning for the first period. He then interrupted the class halfway through it, armed with a shotgun. He fired the first round, striking another student. That student is at the hospital, a 16-year-old who is in critical condition, but stable at this point. He then tried to engage a second student that he named and tried to shoot him and missed. The teacher at that point was trying to get the students out of the classroom and engage the shooter, who had numerous rounds of shotgun shells, a 12-gauge shotgun, numerous rounds in his pockets, and he engaged the student, or the suspect, in conversation. A campus supervisor showed up, was outside the classroom, and together they engaged in conversation with this young man, and at one point he put the shotgun down, and police officers were able to take him into custody.
1996. Just 12 days after what became known as the Port Arthur Massacre, Australia's government responded by announcing a bipartisan deal to enact gun control measures. This in a country of hunters and gun lovers. The pact included agreements with state and local governments. Since the laws were passed for more than 15 years, there's not been a mass shooting in Australia.
Well, it was in Australia at the time was, as you said, a country, and it still is a country where hunting is an important activity. Australia wins Olympic medals in shooting. You know, in Australia there's a high premium placed on rugged masculinity, and it's a frontier country, and so it has some similarities with the US. And also another similarity was that we had in the previous couple of decades occasionally mass mass shootings. About once a year we had a mass shooting, and on each occasion there was a lot of talk about the gun laws, and politicians, similar to here actually, avoiding the issue, saying, well, we need to look at family values and mental health and everything else, and basically being too frightened to do anything about the gun laws, because the gun lobby always threatened to punish electorally any party that did actually strengthen the laws. What happened in '96 was so shocking, and also the level of anger and dissatisfaction and frustration in the public was so high by then that really that was the tipping point for Australia. As you said, the Prime Minister exercised leadership. He called all the states together and said, we're going to fix this. And the laws were state laws, so we had a patchwork of different laws. Some states had stronger laws, but the states that had weaker laws undermined those with stronger laws. And what we got was a scheme of nationally uniform laws which set a much higher standard and included bans on assault weapons and some other measures, which basically meant that you can still own guns in Australia, but the system is just much more under control. And as a result, now 15 years later, we've not had a mass shooting since that time, and also gun deaths in general are about 50% lower than what they were. And that the laws, the evaluation of the laws shows that it's saving hundreds of lives each year, and also about $500 million a year in the economic costs of violence that's been avoided. So overall, our gun laws are a resounding success.
A 1958 Act says no person shall possess a firearm. If you want one, you have to show why. The result, Japan has low gun ownership and even lower gun-related deaths. Barely a dozen a year, one for every 10 million of its citizens.